On our broadcast tonight, fire on the water, setting fire to the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico to try to burn some of it off while fearing an environmental disaster. Preventing Alzheimer's, what millions of Americans have been trying to do to keep it away, but does it work? Caught on tape, an open microphone gets another politician in trouble. Going public, Laura Bush has a new book. Among the topics, what role did she play in the death of a friend, her defense of her husband's post-Katrina flyover, and did somebody really try to poison the president in Germany? Also tonight, team players who are making a difference. Nightly News begins now.
From NBC News World Headquarters in New York, this is NBC Nightly News with Brian Williams.
Good evening. Tonight they have set fire to the Gulf of Mexico, at least the part of it where the oil is in the water, part of a giant effort to contain an oil slick that is making its way slowly toward the Louisiana coastline. Where that drilling platform once stood before sinking, there is still an active deep-sea oil well, a mile underwater, spewing out 42,000 gallons every day until it's plugged. Our chief environmental affairs correspondent, Ann Thompson, is there for us again tonight in Delacroix, Louisiana. So, Ann, this burn is taking place behind you, anywhere from, 50 to 30 miles out?
Right, far enough off the coast, so officials say we will not be able to see that black plume that will come up off the water. Tonight, Brian, with time running short and the weather poised to turn against them, oil and government teams are trying a new tactic to contain this spill.
Fighting a wind pattern that could bring the spill ashore Friday night. Today,
it has happened again. A public figure has been caught being himself, making what he thought was a private remark picked up by a live microphone. This time, it was British Prime Minister Gordon Brown. He's currently in the political fight of his life, and as you're about to see, this doesn't help. Our report tonight from Stephanie Gosk in London.
Hello, how are you doing?
It was supposed to be a routine stop to talk to the average voter 8 days before the election.
It's quite a nice day to work, isn't it?
Just before noon, Prime Minister Gordon Brown took a few questions from grandmother Gillian Duffy.
You can't say anything about the immigrants, but all these Eastern Europeans what are coming in, where are they flocking from?
Brown's response, boilerplate, until he got into the car.
Thanks, take care.
Forgetting that a TV crew had placed a microphone on his lapel and was recording his every unscripted word.
That's a disaster. Should never have put me with that woman. It's ridiculous. Just a sort of bigoted woman.
A reporter quickly shared Brown's comments with Duffy.
But he said, what a disaster. Who got me to talk to that woman? She's a bigot, or words to that effect. And we want to know your response to that.
You're joking.
And then played the tape for her.
I don't think I'll vote.
It is now the blunder heard round Britain. Gordon's gaffe, they cried. Gordon grovels, some revelled.
Brown's disastrous day.
A crash and burn moment? At the least, a self-inflicted wound.
An hour later, at Brown's next campaign stop, a radio station, the Prime Minister was surprised to hear his own words played back to him.
She's just a sort of bigoted woman.
Realizing his campaign was in peril, at 3 o'clock, Brown tore up his afternoon schedule and diverted to Duffy's home to apologize. 45 minutes later, Brown emerged alone on her front step and apologized again.
Like I'm a penitent sinner.
Brown isn't the first politician to fall into the open microphone trap. Like Ronald Reagan in 1984, kidding around about the Soviet Union before a live radio address.
We begin bombing in 5 minutes.
Joe Biden a month ago talking about the healthcare deal. Damage control soon follows. The Prime Minister apologized at least 5 times today. But will the apologies be enough? Gordon Brown took over the Labour Party and the Prime Minister's office from Tony Blair. He's now in the political fight of his life to save his job and this 10 Downing Street address. Brown is now third in the polls behind the polished Conservative leader David Cameron and upstart Liberal Democrat candidate Nick Clegg. But today, the struggling candidate's worst enemy was the struggling candidate himself. Human beings sometimes get a pass on bad behavior. The British voter will soon decide whether prime ministers should get one too. Stephanie Gosk, NBC News, London.
of the Kentucky Derby on NBC.
Former First Lady Laura Bush is out with a new book. Inside, there are details from her life never before known, of defense of her husband and the decisions he made as president. And it turns out, a mystery or two. Our own Andrea Mitchell has taken a look.
After trying to sidestep controversy during her White House years, Laura Bush is about to have her say. In Spoken from the Heart, she writes about Katrina. August 31st, 2 days after the hurricane struck. The levees had failed. People were desperate.
This storm, it is now clear, will change life in this country.
The president flies over instead of visiting. Laura Bush's explanation? He did not want his convoy of vehicles to block trucks delivering water or food or medical supplies, or to impede National Guardsmen from around the nation who are arriving to help. Some experts who lived through the disaster say that doesn't make sense.
The National Guardsmen were not arriving to help when he did his flyover. They had put a quarantine around the city on that Wednesday of the flyover, and when he peered out the window looking at the devastation, and people were stopping, the federal government was stopping trucks from Walmart and Kmart with water and food from even arriving.
For the first time, Mrs. Bush also reveals fear of a terror poison plot at the 2007 Economic Summit in Germany. The first couple and nearly a dozen other U.S. officials got so sick.
I got very sick this morning.
A meeting with France's President Sarkozy was moved to Mr. Bush's hotel room. Mrs. Bush writes, exceedingly alarmed, the Secret Service went on full alert, combing the resort for potential poisons. Doctors later concluded it was a virus. Former officials confirm her account. Most poignantly, Mrs. Bush describes her lifelong guilt over a car accident. She was 17 and drove through an intersection, killing the other driver, a teenage friend.
She talks about how she really hasn't forgiven herself for the fact that she didn't go to the parents.
She writes, I lost my faith that November, lost it for many years. Laura Bush also settles a few scores with Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid, and reveals that Prince Charles and his wife Camilla fortified themselves with a flask of gin before suffering through a White House receiving line. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News, Washington.